I was realizing something this week about my disease. I've got to stop looking at it in this polar terminology that I think of in my mind. I need to help friends and family, my doctors, all think of it this way as well. I tend to think I'm going to either put this disease in remission or cure, and I'm going to get strong again and fully better. No one will really even be able to tell I was sick, and I will go back to my old life and be an athlete and have a strong career and return and restart where I left off and get back all the stuff I lost. So that's on one side. And then on the other polar extreme, I think if I don't do that, if I don't reach cure and remission, this disease is degenerative. It is on its own going to over time degenerate my nerves more and more and more, and on its own will put me in a situation like living in a hospital bed. And so I think about that scary scenario on the other side of the spectrum, and I don't want that to happen. But what I forget too often and need to really embrace is that either one of those scenarios is actually extremely unlikely. It's extremely unlikely that I'll ever get my life back or ever live in a way that wasn't scarred by this disease or changed permanently by this disease. And I will most likely never, there's, without treatments, yes, I'll definitely end up, confined to a hospital bed. But with all the treatments available that are out there, with all that's, all the modern medicine, with all the research, it's actually not that likely that I'll be confined to a hospital bed. There's most likely going to be options, may not be very pretty options on that spectrum. Some of them may have some pretty nasty side effects, and my life might not be very good at all if I'm on that end of the spectrum. They'd probably be able to keep me out of a hospital bed for the majority of the time, at least a while, another, couple decades, possibly. So what I got to focus on is what's more likely, and that's in between these two polar extremes. Anywhere in that spectrum is a life that is varying degrees of livable. If it's on the side where the bad scenario is, where the treatments aren't working and aren't keeping the disease at bay, then it's not a very good picture. It's not a pretty picture. It's going to be really hard to get through that. It's going to be a lot about surviving than necessarily having a full life, and about a lot of fighting to try to get to the other side of that spectrum. If I can stay kind of in the middle or on the upside of that spectrum, then I can have, or if I can get to that where I'm staying there, because I'm currently not. I'm currently really wavering a lot, jumping all over the place on my abilities and how I feel and where the disease progression is at. Sometimes it gets a lot better, sometimes it gets a lot worse. Lately it's been a lot worse. I might have, for example, a situation like if we can put the disease into remission, where my body's not constantly at war with itself, my immune system attacking the nerves, and then my body trying to heal the nerves. If that process exhausts me, that process sucks the life out of me each day, it takes away my ability to do anything. It doesn't matter if my legs work or not, if I don't have the strength to use them, because all my energy is sucked away fighting this constant disease. And I think it's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about this. It's not like it happened at the beginning and I lost my ability to walk once and then I had to just recover from that. It's that every single day it's fighting back and the disease keeps going. The disease is active. It's been active every day for the last over 3 years. And sometimes my healing ability is winning and it's less active. Sometimes it's winning and I'm not able to keep up with the damage, or the damage over time adds up and my body can't take away all that scar tissue. And it causes long-term nerve degeneration problems. So the fact that's happening and is causing damage, it's a fact. It's taking me farther away from this end of the spectrum of like going back to my full abilities ever. That's getting farther and farther away, and that really scares me. But it doesn't mean that I need to think about, getting farther away from this means I'm getting closer to this horrible scenario over here. If I keep fighting and keep, looking at the research and looking for new things to try and It's a really rare disease. There just isn't a pill you can take for this. This is a really complex disease to try to put into remission. And there might be, so if I keep fighting, hopefully I can get it into remission before I lose so much ability that I'm stuck over here. And if I can do that, I mean, wherever I am on that spectrum, it's not going to be all the way on the left, because I think I'm probably already, frankly, past that point. It's possible. There's like a miracle chance it's possible I could get back to being close. Like, maybe not all the way I can go running, but I could maybe, to the average person, look fairly normal. But I will never at this point, I just can't, from everything I've read and everything I'm looking at, I don't think I'll ever get full function back at this point. There's just been too much damage and go on too long. I will always have to be careful not to let the disease come back. If I were to get it into remission, it can come back at any time very easily from stress, from the other viruses that I catch, can re-trigger this disease mechanism. So I'll always have to live carefully, and it's always going to be a different life. So, in a way, this end of it that I've been hoping for, I'm accepting is kind of out of reach at this point. I'm falling back on the spectrum, but maybe we can stop the disease, get into remission before I'm too far gone from that, and I still have a pretty good amount of functionality. And maybe I end up on crutches forever, and that's not so bad. It's not the worst thing. There's certainly sports I can do still, but I can only do those things if I get it into remission. And this is the thing that I think a lot of people who look at my disease don't understand. Like, I see, you hear about people all the time who are like, say, in a wheelchair and they're doing sports and they're athletic, and that doesn't mean they can't do things or they can't work. And that's not what this disease is about. It's not about whether I'm on crutches or in a wheelchair or, sitting up or whatever muscles are working. It's actually, that is a very, very minor, in a way, part of this disease. It is maybe what is most visible to other people, but the disease itself is that there's a war being raged in my body. My body is attacking my nerves, and my body's trying to heal the damage that it's doing. And that sucks all the energy out of you, just like if you had the flu or mono, but it never stopped. It doesn't matter if my legs work perfectly. I can't necessarily go use them on any given day because the disease is sucking all this energy, too much energy out of me, and my body doesn't have the ability to go do that. We're not talking about stamina because I've been sick a long time. We're talking about active, the amount of resources a body has to fight disease, to heal, to be in a healing state. You can't have, like, let's think about a very simple example that most people are familiar with. Let's say you're a runner. Let's say you run 2 miles every day, and it takes you 20 minutes. And then you get a really bad flu. And then you really shouldn't be running that day. Most likely you should be recovering from the flu. But let's say you had to, and you try to go run those 2 miles in 20 minutes. You're not going to be able to. If you were able to, by some chance you were able to push that much adrenaline through, okay. But if you had that flu the next day, and you tried to do that again, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and it didn't go away, a week later, there's no way you'd be able to run 2 miles in 20 minutes like you could before, when you didn't have that flu raging in your body. Now, if you take that example and you apply it to my disease is kind of like a flu. It's actually doing more damage than a flu. And then I have on top of that flu, that's where my immune system, it thinks, instead of attacking the flu virus to try to get rid of that virus, it thinks of the myelin sheaths of my nerves, that those cells are viruses all over my body, like this massive, massive flu that's attacking, and it's just freaking out because this flu is just everywhere on every single nerve, it's coating every single nerve. And so it's going crazy and diverting resources from the rest of my body, from my brain, so that affects my cognitive ability a lot, to fight that. And then on top of that, all of that damage is doing, another part of my body is saying, oh gosh, we're getting attacked. We have to go repair all this damage. It's like we're getting 1,000 cuts, cut by 1,000 knives all the time, and trying to repair all those little tiny minuscule cuts. Thousands probably underestimating it. So my body has to divert everything to that most of the time. If I get a good day is basically that for whatever reason, the disease has calmed down and isn't attacking me quite so much. So I get energy that I can divert to other things. Normally, that is brought on by a treatment that was very effective. Normally, so far we haven't seen that last very long. On those days, I try to go out and do things. Right? In those, sometimes it lasts more than a day. Sometimes it lasts hours, only hours. Sometimes it's a day. Sometimes it's weeks. Sometimes I get good months. I try to get life done during those periods of time. So that's when you'll see pictures of me. You'll see me doing stuff that looks like what other people do, only most people don't know that it's a pretty heavily modified version of that. Or I might push through and do something that is very much like what other people do on a good day, especially if I've had a good stretch and my nerves have healed a lot. I have a lot of my functionality back. Add to that the fact that I was an athlete before I got this, and I was in extremely good shape and have extremely strong muscles. And even now, after over 3 years of having this disease, and a large portion of those years being spent on the couch and in bed, and tons of atrophy, like way more atrophy than muscle gain, I'm still actually much stronger than the average person, like muscularly. So it can be deceiving that when that disease action pauses, that all of a sudden I feel good and I'm actually very strong, and I could, do something that someone else who's healthy could do. Maybe I can't do it for very long, or maybe if I do too much of it, it actually will bring the disease mechanism back on from the stress of it. But I certainly cherish those times, and I do stuff whenever I can, because, that's my only chance to do it. And the goal of all these treatments is to, on this spectrum, hopefully before I get to this far side of it, stop the disease mechanism on a more permanent basis. It may be that the treatments only delay or only quiet it down for short periods of time, then I need another treatment again. Like right now I get them every 2 weeks, and they don't always delay a whole lot. They tend to do some help in slowing down the disease process or the aggressiveness of it. But the hope is they get to a point where each treatment puts it on hold and gives me those good days where my energy can be diverted to normal body functions and healthy body functions, not spending all of it on this war of attacking and healing. And then the idea is if you find a treatment that does that, then do the treatment, see how long that lasts, and then do the treatment again before it stops working, and then just keep me in that place. And then I no longer get as much degrading in my nerves. I can heal to my maximum point. It may not be full healing. Some of my nerves at this point are more than likely, beyond repair, at least some of the small fiber nerve endings. But if, say that were to happen right now, I likely would get a really solid chunk of function back. And I would have to be very careful, and I wouldn't be like everybody else. It wouldn't be quite as strong, but I could have a really good quality of life. So that is really the goal, somewhere on that spectrum, not just 100% great. And the alternative is not this horrible, horrible place, but we'll see. We'll keep fighting and hopefully find where that mark lands soon.